All right, let's dive into March Madness.
All right.
So here's the deal. After day one of this tournament, my bracket was perfect, and I was feeling good. First time ever after one day I had a perfect bracket. I was posting all over social. I felt good about myself. I was like, yes, it's an accomplishment in life. And then
Yeah.
my bracket went to complete crap because I got too cute. Uh, the time of this recording, we are on the Sunday of the Elite Eight, so we still have, I believe it is Houston and Tennessee, Michigan State and Auburn today to determine who goes to the Final Four.
Yep.
Um, First of all, man, how's your bracket looking?
Yeah.
Your main bracket, let's put it that way.
My my I only did one this year, so it is my main bracket.
I did one bracket, and this year I added an extra bracket. I asked ChatGPT to fill out a bracket.
Oh, okay.
And
I
it's doing better than my main bracket, so shut on AI.
see my Achilles heel when bracket season comes around is I've always been like there's always a couple big upsets, and it's like can you find them and like because there's obviously going to be like some that are like the obvious ones, kind of like Drake winning their first game, for example, like ones that you like,
Yeah.
okay, I can see that, but there's always
And
like
like Arkansas, you could sort of see it.
you
And
can see.
I believe like Creighton was a nine seed, which felt criminally underrated to me.
Yeah, but it's like there's always like the couple, like one or two that are like no one saw coming, and like it's I always try to find those and pick those out. But also this year, if you look at the Elite Eight teams, all of them are like top four seeds. It's so like this
Well,
year
they're
too,
all
like
one
it's
or
not been
two
a good.
seeds now. Texas Tech
Yeah.
is the lowest seed, and they got eliminated yesterday at the time of this recording.
So it's like what are you this year it's not even like much of a possibility for like a true Cinderella. Has really screwed things up. So my east side of the bracket, I only had one miss so far, and that was St. Mary's over Vandy. Other than that, I've been perfect on that
Yeah,
bracket.
I liked Vandy too. Wait, you've been perfect the whole bracket all the way
No,
up?
just for the east, just for the east. The bottom half, St. John's losing
Killed
was
me.
killed me.
I had them in the final. I had them losing to Duke in the final.
Same, exact same thing for me. And my quote unquote Cinderella that I was gonna be like a somewhat lower seed that makes it to like the final four. I had Indiana, or no, not Indiana, Illinois meeting Duke in the final four
Okay,
as
that's
like
interesting.
as a surprise final
I
four
had
team.
Michigan in the final four, and I felt real good about it on Friday night, and then uh Pettigrew for Auburn just took over
Yeah.
and it couldn't miss. Um, so that was my one lower seed. Besides that, I didn't have any other lower seed making it past the Sweet 16. I thought maybe Vanderbilt could give Alabama another shot, like in football.
Hmm.
Um, I was stupid enough to not listen to our buddy Alex Wilcox, and I decided to take Akron over Arizona. That was a bad idea.
Never.
Um, but nonetheless, um, I am watching this Duke team. Cooper Flagg, by the way, for the record, he needs to go to the East. If another superstar goes to the West, the East might as well fold. I mean, it's ridiculous how many superstars are out West in the NBA as opposed to the
Right.
East. But I'm watching this team like last night against Alabama. He was what? At one certain time, like 4 of 18 from the field, and they're up 15. Like they don't even need him to have a good
They don't
offensive
need
game,
them.
and they're blowing out Alabama. Like, UConn was the talk of the town for 2 years and how good they were. And obviously, there was controversy there at the end of their game in the second round. But I'm watching this Duke team and I'm going, like, I think this Duke team would have murdered the UConn team from the last 2 years. That's how good they are.
It really is just how crazy, like after a few struggles, because a lot of the team is very, very young at the beginning of the season. They've just turned into a buzzsaw, and there's nothing you can do about it. So like I would be extremely surprised if they lost in the Final Four of the championship, no matter who they play. Auburn might be able to give them a game, but like their team is just it
I think if they
playing on
meet
all
Houston
cylinders.
in the Final Four, like Houston could give them a game,
Yeah.
and Auburn too. But you know what impressed me the most? It's not even Cooper Flagg, and he's obviously sensational, and I'm starting to have a man crush on the kid. I mean, the kid's barely 18. He should be a senior in high school now, and he looks like an NBA player. He looks like
Right.
he's 24 years old, dominating the sport at 18. But it's the thing about Duke is their bigs are athletic. They jump out of the ceiling and they can pass and they play good defense. And that's what's the difference for them is their defensive athletic bigs.
They're not one dimensional. They
No,
are NBA talent bigs.
they got three lottery picks. And
Yeah.
no disrespect to Auburn at all because they had the resume. They beat every freaking team in the SEC they possibly could. But I thought Duke should have been the overall number one seed. I just thought that they had the better overall talent.
And talent, well, if you look at it from the perspective too of just pure talent from age, like the team is mostly freshmen and sophomores for Duke, where Auburn is people using their fifth and sixth year of eligibility. Like they have a good experienced team where Duke is just pure athletic, you know,
Yeah.
dominance.
And like last night, like if Alabama could have shot the ball better, they could have given Duke a game. Like that's what you have to do. Arizona gave Duke a legit scare. Caleb
Yeah.
Wolf was playing out of his mind. I there was a certain point in that game. I think Duke was up 10 in the second half early, and I was like, okay, they got this. And all of a sudden, with 4 minutes left, it's like, oh no, this is a game. I think it was a 3 point game with like 4 minutes left or something like that. And Arizona shot really well. And that's what you're going to have to do to beat this Duke team. But, speaking of Duke, Cooper Flagg, he's going to be universally the number one pick. And I swear to God, if he goes to Washington or Utah, he should request to go back to school.
Right.
Um, this kid, I always looked at the NBA and I'm like, okay, we've got Wemby, we've got Jokic, you've got Luka, you've got these international stars. If this kid's as good as he's playing right now, man, I think there's a chance Cooper Flagg could become the new face of the NBA. I think he's that good. I'm watching this kid going at 18. He's better than half these guys in the NBA right now.
I could see that, and it just becomes, if hopefully, you know, a better team than the Wizards, but someone in the East, say, gets him, it could be a
Like Philly
Wemby
or
Flag.
Chicago. Like by the grace of God, again, if he goes to the West, if he goes to Sacramento or somewhere, like please request a trade or please go back to school. I mean, Giannis at age 30 almost feels like I hate to say it, he kind of feels like a dinosaur in the East. He's almost forgotten about, it feels like. Like the two teams that are most talked about have Jason Tatum and Donovan Mitchell, and they're good players, but they don't have, I would argue, both of them don't have the personality to be that guy and be the face of the
Right.
league. Like the East needs Cooper Flag. It does.
It really does. And it, it could be the next like big, like I was saying, like big rivalry of two superstars of Wemby and Cooper Flag, both sides of the NBA, one in the West, one in the
Yeah.
East would be a good selling point for the league for sure.
So here's the thing, right? Everybody talks about the Cinderellas and how much we love them, but the ratings say we all love the Blue Bloods. The ratings have never been up more. I believe I saw a stat, something about 9 million people have watched at least 1 minute of every NCAA tournament game this year. It's been a great tournament, but I'm not saying we need upsets every year and we need a crazy first round because I do think it makes for better games at this point in the tournament. But can we get one Sister Jean? Can we get one Butler? Like, I don't know. I miss the one story of a school we never heard of going to the Elite Eight or to the Sweet 16 at the very least. Like that part I do miss.
I fully agree too. I had a couple teams, or at least going back to my bracket, like it I just like it for like the feel good story, kind of aspect
Yeah,
and
and
just the
I'm a big dynasty guy. Like I don't think dynasties are bad for sports. I think we need villains in sports. I think the best players are on the best teams and all that. But I think college basketball is the one sport where it's like because it's a one and done tournament, and because of the conference tournaments now, you can make an argument the regular season is almost meaningless. I mean, if you win your conference, look at a team like NC State last year, right? They were
Right.
under 500 in the regular season. They made the Final Four. So, like that story, I like. I think it's the one sport where it's like, again, we don't need four or five of these teams like 2 years ago, but can we get one of them?
It's just so hard to do it now because once a team has a pretty good year where a player is really dominant and say they make the tournament and say like their junior year and they make the win one game and then they make the round of 32, it that player more likely than not is going to be poached by a big team.
And by the way, he's probably already in the transfer portal.
Right. And like the amount of like a dude from Michigan literally got like went in the transfer portal while they were still
Yeah,
playing in the
that
tournament.
I don't love. That is wrong. And it's the same thing in football, by the way. It's not fair to the school. It's not fair to the
No.
players. Like I look at a guy sideways. It's like you know, finding a new job, right? Like you give your employer the 2 week notice. That's what the transfer portal is when you're in the middle of a playoff tournament. It's like, hey guys, I'm leaving, but you know what? I'm gonna give it my all for the way. And deep down, you're already 1 foot out the door.
Right. And that's like the hardest part is like now teams make super teams like going back to Akron, for example. The majority of their team that won the MAC and dominated the MAC, they poached good players that
Yeah.
were bench players at West
And
Virginia, North Carolina,
they
and
only
Ohio
lost
State.
one. By the way, speaking of Akron, how crazy was that? They only lost one conference game. And a conference that historically obviously has turnover and all that. Like, and to your point, they did it by poaching guys.
And it's just the NIL just
Yeah.
speaks. It has a way with words, if you will, in terms of like building these teams and like in college football, there's now general managers.
Oh,
Um,
Bill
it, it's
Belichick is in college football. I never thought I would say. I thought it was a joke.
Yeah,
I thought it was a joke. He was going there. I thought it was going to be a 1 year stay and back to the NFL, but he's got a real GM now, and it sounds like he's there for the long haul. I mean, how crazy is that? And the other thing that I think that we didn't anticipate with NIL, I know I certainly did it, is specifically with basketball, right? Because unlike the NFL, where the NFL you can get guys in the fourth, fifth, sixth round and they become stars. In
yeah,
the NBA, historically, even in the late lottery, you're guessing on players. So if you have a college guy who's a really good college player and you know, hey, I'm going to be a second round pick or I'm going to be undrafted or whatever, these guys can transfer and be like 9 year seniors playing college basketball their whole life and making money as opposed to going to the NBA and sitting on the bench.
right. So I mean, it's tough because like it really makes it harder to compete as a smaller school because there's less of an incentive to stay around nowadays to get that recognition. But also, you know, in some cases it bites the players in the butt too in terms of playing time. Going to like just because I pay so much attention to MAC basketball with
Yeah.
Kent State and everything. Peyton Sparks was a really good player for Ball State for like 2 years. He transferred to Indiana last year, got no playing time. He came back this year to Ball State, and he was a shell of himself. So it's like it's such a um like a balancing act too for the player in terms of like self-interest and then like their interest or their development as a player. It's such a complicated sort of just like balancing of the scales with that as well.
So let me ask you this. 2 years ago, when San Diego State and that whole crew, we had like a 10 seed in the Final Four, it was like all upsets. And I
Uh,
kind of thought, okay, could this be the new norm? Because the NBA refuses to embrace college basketball. The NBA draft, we don't know anybody essentially that gets drafted. And, I thought there was going to be no stars in college basketball, and that was going to be sort of more upsets in the tournament going forward. Clearly, that seems like more of a one-off year. Where this now, and you mentioned it with the NIL and the small schools, like I don't know. We have had more 30-point blowouts and less Cinderellas the last 2 years than the average over the last decade. Does this now, with majority ones and two seeds, maybe you get a 3 or 4 seed here and there, does this now feel like the new normal, or is this a one-off year?
I personally want it to be a one-off year because again, I like a good upset. Being someone who, for the majority of the teams he roots for, tend to be the Cinderellas or the small market teams. Like I have an affinity for those types of schools having that success. I want it to be, but it's just going to continue to get harder as long as NIL doesn't really have too many regulations around it to kind of give incentives for smaller programs to keep people around. Like I've always been a big proponent of, which is probably never going to happen now because the floodgates are open, but like not it being a player like can be paid $2 million to go to X school. It's every single player in the NCAA, they get the same cut
Yeah,
to give an
like
incentive to stick around because it's not going to make too much of a difference from a financial standpoint.
I also think if you're gonna have NIL, they probably need to go back to the one and done rule needs to be over. Like it's
Uh,
like I don't like the fact that the college experience, because me and you both went to college. You're still around the university, as you said. Like I couldn't imagine leaving Kent State after 1 year. It took me 2 years to figure out how college works, just with
right.
classes and stuff, right? So, and I do think that would help college basketball too. If you have guys that are there for more than a couple years, they can stay around, they can get seasoned. Because I also think it is harder. We talked about the NBA with the 3-point shot. Because these college guys, most of them for the most part, aren't shooting the ball the way they do in the NBA. It takes the NBA. You get a guy, you draft him at 18. It takes him 4 years to develop. Like it's hard to draft guys in the NBA, which is why we see teams like the Wizards be bad for a decade, even though they get a top five pick every year.
And like I guess go back also too to like Darius Garland. Like, was he a decent player when he first got drafted? Yes, but he's only really turned it on in like the past year, you
Even a
know?
Jason Tatum, right? And even like I mean, Luca was special right out of the gate, but he didn't get Dallas to where they were at in terms of championship contender for 3, 4 years. Even LeBron, when he came out of high school at 18, the Cavs didn't make the playoffs till year three. You look at a guy like Wemby who came in and was supposed to change around the Spurs. He really didn't till year two this year until he got hurt. Um, and I also don't understand why the NBA refuses to embrace college basketball. I think one of the things that have made college football explode is that you are watching NFL players on Saturday. And we watch their journey and we know who these guys are. We know who, Shador is, and we know who Cam Ward is. Outside of Cooper Flagg, we don't know who any of these guys are that are coming into the NBA.
I mean, I want to say also part of it might just be saturation. There's so many other teams, given majority of NBA talent are going to be in the Power Four conferences, Power Five in college basketball. Um, but also too, it's like there's so many games too might play a part of it where like you can digest it more in college football because it's like the one game they have every single week, potentially. But it would be cool if the NBA did like have more focus on the development of players. It's definitely, I guess,
They're obsessed with the G League, which I mean, outside of Ahmed Thompson and I guess Jalen Green, which funny they're both on the Rockets,
uh,
it hasn't worked. Like to me, I don't know. It's strange.
it's
And now
just
the
minor league basketball, and no one
and
wants
and guys
minor
are
league
getting
basketball.
paid. And before NIL, like I stood it. I backed the players. I was like, why would I go to college when I could get paid for playing professional basketball already? Like I understood it. Now I think NIL has helped college basketball a little bit, but it's also made the tournament worse. It's a double-edged sword.
Right. It it's still in the early days of NIL, relatively speaking, too. So it'll be interesting to see how things continue to develop. I'll still like I'll still die on the hill of like it's good that players are getting a cut, but it's definitely too much too fast, and it's not for the overall benefit of the NCAA. And then I got maybe NBA just also maybe views college basketball as potential extra competition or something. Maybe
Well,
that's why
again,
they're
though,
not.
think the NFL is invincible, and I get it. They don't really
Yeah,
care, but they have helped college football. College football had record viewership this year. Maybe it was the expanded conferences and the better matchups in the regular season, which was a lot more fun. And the talent was there, and I helped with that, and I get it. But the NBA could do a similar model, and they're not doing it.
I don't know. It's similar to like almost like the decisions related to like improving the game or like the All-Star game. They're trying these gimmicks, but nothing that really sticks.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I guess. The how I don't know how like almost as if like for another analogy, like company CEOs do the most brain scratching thing you can think of, and they just double down on it. It's an enigma I I don't really understand either.
So last question for you. Have you heard these rumors about speaking of the NCAA, about the tournament potentially expanding?
Yes, I have heard that.
What are your thoughts on it? Because I feel like it would eliminate the NIT, I think, and whatever Fox is doing right now with the King's Crown or whatever they're calling it. Um, I get it. NIL, obviously, more money, get smaller schools more money for getting into the tournament, but it would dilute the tournament even more. I don't know how it would work. Maybe they'd start the tournament earlier. I don't know. I'm very confused by it. I I'm kind of indifferent. Like I don't know what to think of it.
I'm personally against it. Like I think it works out perfectly where like half of the seeds or half of the spots go to conference champions and the other half go to the teams like good teams and everything. And I don't see it so much as it being an opportunity for smaller schools to get more opportunities to get into the tournament. I think they'll end up being filled by larger market teams like for example, Stanford was in the NIT or Oklahoma State was in the
Yeah, that's
NIT,
true.
and it's just going to dilute with just more of like their bigger name teams, maybe not necessarily the best team to put in there, but we have a little bit more of a like argument to put them in there purely just because they're in a bigger conference and they have a bigger like brand to them.
How would it work? Do you know? Would they? I've heard that they're just going to add like the equivalent of an extra round. Would it start earlier? Would there be buys? Do we know any of those details yet?
Well, if they wanted to add an extra full round, that would be like half of the NCAA
That's what I've heard.
going
Is it
in.
could expand up to like 80 teams.
It's I if it was 80 teams, definitely some teams would have buys. That's definitely would be the case. Like if they did a true add an extra full round, that would be 128 teams, which obviously is not feasible. That is way, 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 way too
Might as well put
big.
every Division One team in there.
If like half of them. So it would be like way too big. I just don't think it makes sense. Like the way they have it right now, I think fits really well, and it gives at least one team from every conference a shot. Are they going to win? Almost definitely not, but it's like gives them the shot. That's something I wish, in a similar stance, if which they probably will at some point, expand the college football playoff even more. Like I'm a big fan of like every single conference, they get an automatic bid whoever wins their conference championship, for example. I like that model, but I think the NCAA tournament with how it is and how they're able to fit in the games and everything like that, I think works perfectly fine. And I don't think they should expand it further if wanted my 2 cents on it.
So I don't want to get into college football conversation as we wrap it up. I'll bring you on
Yeah.
another time to discuss it. But one of the things that I did not like, since you're on the topic of the conference championship this year, is in my opinion, Oregon got punished for winning and Penn State got rewarded for losing. And I think if you're going to have a conference championship, they have to matter. And I'm not sure with a college football expansion if you need conference championship weekend. That was my takeaway.
The traditionalist in me doesn't want to see it go away, but also I see your point too. Um, like in a sense, for at least the Power Four conferences, it's kind of like a first round game almost in a way. It I will agree that it was a bad draw for Oregon with Ohio State coming in screaming like hell into the playoff, but I don't know. It first year of the big expanded one. I'm sure more changes are to come, and I guess we'll see uh how the league wants to structure things so um the higher seeded teams don't get such bad draws with their first game in the tournament.
David, open up your schedule because I'm officially making you our Brandon's World College football analyst and college basketball, our college sports analyst. We're going to bring you out of the summer to have that conversation. Like that clip from the Brandon's World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brandon's World podcast right here on YouTube.